When you've been married for 10 years, it's easy to slip into a rhythm, a routine that feels comfortable, familiar, and safe. That's how it was with Samantha and me. Our life together wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for a long time, I thought we had built something unshakable. I'm Ethan, a 38-year-old financial consultant. I spend most of my days crunching numbers, advising clients, and ensuring other people's financial futures are secure. It's a demanding job, but it's one I've always been proud of. And for the first 9 years of our marriage, Samantha was my biggest cheerleader. Samantha. Even just saying her name brings back a flood of memories. Of the woman I fell in love with, the woman who used to light up every room she walked into. She's 35 now, a yoga enthusiast and a part-time lifestyle blogger with a knack for making even the most mundane moments look Instagram-worthy. When we first met, I was drawn to her energy, her zest for life, and the way she pushed me out of my comfort zone. I've always been the planner, the one who prefers order and structure. But Samantha? She was the spark that made everything brighter. In those early years, she inspired me to live more adventurously. She'd plan spontaneous road trips, drag me to new restaurants, and convince me to try things I never would have considered on my own. I loved that about her. We built a good life together. Our cozy suburban home was the kind of place you'd see in a magazine. Well-kept, warm, and filled with the laughter of friends and family. We hosted dinner parties, went on annual vacations, and had inside jokes that made us burst into laughter at the most inappropriate times. But over the past year, something shifted. It started gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. Samantha's passion for yoga had always been part of her life, but it transformed into something more. Suddenly, fitness wasn't just a hobby. It became an obsession. "Jake says I should focus on building my core strength," she'd say, casually referencing her gym instructor as she adjusted her yoga mat in the living room. Jake. I didn't think much of him at first. Samantha mentioned him in passing, the same way she'd mentioned the cashier at the grocery store or her favorite barista. But as the months went on, his name came up more frequently. I tried to be supportive. She seemed genuinely excited about her fitness journey, and I wanted her to be happy. But it wasn't just about yoga anymore. She started spending more time at the gym. Hours at a time, often late into the evening. Our once regular date nights became sporadic, then non-existent. "I'm just so tired," she'd say, collapsing onto the couch after yet another late session. "Jake really pushed us hard today." I'd nod, forcing a smile, but inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Samantha had always been passionate, but this felt different. There were other signs too, little things that didn't seem important on their own but added up over time. She started dressing differently. Tighter leggings, brighter tops, outfits that seemed more suited for showing off than working out. She became more guarded with her phone, tilting the screen away from me whenever I walked into the room. When I asked her about it, she'd laugh it off. "Ethan, you're being ridiculous. It's just fitness stuff." Maybe I was being ridiculous. Maybe I was imagining things, or maybe I wasn't. The woman who once looked at me like I was her entire world now seemed distracted, distant. I tried to talk to her about it, but every conversation ended the same way, with her brushing me off or accusing me of being overly sensitive. Looking back, I think I knew even then that something was wrong. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Because when you've spent 10 years building a life with someone, you don't want to believe that it could all come crashing down. You want to hold on to the memories, the good times, the love you once shared. But sometimes, holding on isn't enough. And sometimes, the life you've built isn't as unshakable as you thought. Jake. I didn't know it at the time, but that name would become a permanent fixture in my life. And not in a good way. It all started innocently enough. Samantha had been raving about her new gym for weeks, excited about the classes, the equipment, and the fresh sense of energy she'd found in her fitness journey. She mentioned Jake casually at first, just another detail in the whirlwind of her enthusiasm. "There's this new trainer, Jake," she said one evening while setting her yoga mat on the living room floor. "He's really knowledgeable. He helped me adjust my form during squats, and wow, it made such a difference." I nodded, not giving it much thought. I was happy for her. She seemed genuinely passionate about this new chapter in her life, and as her husband, I wanted to support her. Over the next few weeks, Jake's name started popping up more frequently. "Jake says we should try foam rolling. It's a game changer for muscle recovery," she said, demonstrating a technique she'd learned. Or, "Jake recommended this protein shake. It's disgusting, but apparently amazing for post-workout recovery." I didn't think much of it at first. Trainers are supposed to guide their clients, right? It made sense that she'd take his advice seriously. Besides, I was glad she had someone encouraging her to push herself. But then, things started to shift. Jake wasn't just a name anymore. He became a presence in our home. Samantha started quoting him like he was some kind of fitness guru. "Jake says this," or "Jake recommends that." It was as if everything she did at the gym revolved around him. One evening, as we were having dinner, Samantha showed me a video on her phone. It was a short clip of Jake demonstrating a workout routine. "Look at his technique," she said, her eyes lighting up as she explained what made his method so effective. I watched the video, noting Jake's easy smile and effortless charm. He was fit, confident, and undeniably charismatic. The kind of guy who could probably sell ice to a snowman. "Seems like a good trainer," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Oh, he's the best," she replied, her voice full of admiration. "He really knows how to push people, but in a way that makes you feel capable, you know?" I nodded, though something about her tone unsettled me. As time went on, Samantha's enthusiasm for fitness seemed to revolve entirely around Jake. She'd gush about how he motivated her, how he made workouts fun but challenging. She even started changing her gym schedule to fit his availability. "You're going in early tomorrow?" I asked one night as she packed her gym bag. "Yeah," she said, not looking up. "Jake's hosting a strength training class, and I don't want to miss it." I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it was just part of her routine. But the more she talked about him, the more I started to notice the little things. Like how she spent extra time getting ready before heading to the gym, picking outfits that seemed more about looking good than staying comfortable. Or how she'd scroll through her phone after workouts, smiling at something I couldn't see. Once, I glanced over her shoulder and saw Jake's name on the screen. It was a text message, though she quickly swiped it away before I could read it. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice casual. "Just Jake," she said, her tone dismissive. "He's sharing a new stretching routine for after workouts." I didn't push her. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was perfectly normal for her to communicate with her trainer. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Jake had become a constant in our lives without ever stepping foot into our home. His advice, his routines, his words, they were always there, woven into the fabric of Samantha's day-to-day life. I wanted to believe it was harmless. I wanted to trust her. But the more I saw, the harder it became to ignore the unease building in the pit of my stomach. Looking back, I realized that Jake wasn't just a trainer. He was a catalyst, the spark that set fire to everything Samantha and I had built together. At the time, I didn't know how far it would go, but I could feel the foundation of our marriage beginning to crack. And Jake? He was standing right in the middle of it. The red flags started out small. So small, in fact, that I almost missed them. A late night here, a guarded text message there. At first, I brushed them off, convincing myself that I was imagining things. But as the weeks went on, those little signs began to pile up, forming a picture I couldn't ignore. Samantha's gym sessions, which had initially seemed like a healthy outlet, were now taking over her life. She wasn't just going to the gym after work anymore. She was practically living there. Late-night extra sessions became a regular occurrence, and weekends that used to be reserved for us were now booked solid with back-to-back classes. "You're heading to the gym again?" I asked one Saturday morning as she packed her bag. She barely looked up. Yeah, Jake's running a special boot camp this weekend. It's too good to miss. I nodded, trying to keep my voice neutral. Don't you think you're overdoing it a bit? You've been at the gym almost every day this week. She sighed, zipping up her bag. I just want to stay consistent, Ethan. Isn't that a good thing? I didn't argue. At the time, it felt easier to let it go than to push the issue. The phone was the next thing I noticed. Samantha had always been glued to her phone, scrolling through Instagram, texting friends, or looking up new recipes. But lately, she seemed different. She'd tilt the screen away from me when I walked into the room, or quickly swipe away a notification like she didn't want me to see it. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and immediately flipped it over. "Who's that?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Just one of the girls from the gym," she said casually. Her answer should have put me at ease, but it didn't. The way she avoided my gaze, the way her fingers tightened around her phone, it all felt off. Even our friends started to notice the change in her. At a dinner party one evening, my best friend Tom leaned over and nudged me with his elbow. "You should meet this Jake guy," he joked. "Sounds like he's more involved in Samantha's life than you are." I forced a laugh, but his words hit too close to home. Another friend, Rachel, chimed in. "She talks about him all the time. He must be a hell of a trainer." "She's just really into fitness right now," I said, brushing it off. But inside, I was seething. It wasn't just Jake's presence that bothered me. It was how everyone else seemed to notice it too. The tension between Samantha and me grew with each passing week. I started asking more questions, trying to understand what was really going on. "Why do you need so many private sessions with Jake?" I asked one evening. "You've been spending more time with him than with me." She rolled her eyes, her frustration evident. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous. He's my trainer. That's his job." "Is it his job to text you at 10 p.m.? I countered. Her face flushed and she crossed her arms. "You're being paranoid. Jake is a professional. He cares about his clients and that's it." "I'm not being paranoid," I said, my voice rising. "I just feel like you're more invested in your relationship with him than in your marriage to me." Her jaw tightened and she shook her head. "I can't believe you're doing this. You're being controlling, Ethan. Do you even hear yourself?" Her words cut deeper than I expected. Was I being controlling? Was I overreacting? Looking back, I realize now that I was searching for reassurance, for any sign that my suspicions were unfounded. But instead of calming my fears, Samantha's defensiveness only made them worse. The red flags were no longer subtle. They were glaring, impossible to ignore. And yet I held on, hoping that I was wrong, that the woman I loved would prove me wrong. But deep down, I think I already knew. Something was broken between us, and it wasn't something that could be fixed with excuses or reassurances. The cracks in our marriage were spreading, and Jake was at the center of it all. That evening started like so many others had in recent months, with Samantha telling me she had a late-night private training session at the gym. Normally, I would have forced myself to brush it off, swallowing the bitter taste of suspicion and convincing myself I was overthinking things. But not this time. Something about the way she said it, the casual tone, the quick glance at her phone before she grabbed her bag, set my nerves on edge. "Don't wait up," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As the door closed behind her, I sat in the quiet of our living room, staring at nothing and feeling the weight of my doubts pressing down on me. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth. 15 minutes later, I was in my car, driving to the gym. The parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived, the fluorescent lights casting long, eerie shadows across the pavement. Samantha's car was parked near the entrance, the only sign of life in an otherwise deserted lot. I sat in my car for a moment, my heart pounding as I debated what to do. Part of me wanted to turn around and go home, to cling to the shred of hope that this was all just a misunderstanding. But the other part of me, the part that had been quietly screaming for months, knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the gym. The building was dark and quiet, save for a faint light spilling out from one of the private studios in the back. As I approached, I heard muffled voices and the sound of laughter. My chest tightened. I moved closer, careful not to make a sound, until I was just outside the glass door of the studio. What I saw made my blood run cold. Samantha was perched on the edge of a workout bench, her hands resting on Jake's shoulders as he leaned in close. Their faces were inches apart, and then, just like that, they kissed. It wasn't a casual, fleeting kiss. It was intimate, slow, and deliberate. The kind of kiss that spoke of familiarity, of something that had been building for far too long. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was stand there, frozen in disbelief as the life I thought I knew shattered around me. And then, something inside me snapped. I shoved the door open with enough force to make it slam against the wall, the sound echoing through the empty gym. "Samantha!" I barked, my voice trembling with anger. She jerked away from Jake, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" Jake, on the other hand, didn't flinch. He turned to me with an infuriating smirk, his demeanor calm and smug. "It's nothing," he said casually, as if I'd just walked in on them discussing fitness techniques. "I'm just training her lips." The audacity of his words sent a jolt of rage through me. My fists clenched at my sides as I took a step toward him. "Training her lips?" I growled. "Is that what you call this?" "Ethan, please," Samantha interjected, her voice shaky as she stepped between us. "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I snapped, glaring at her. "What part of this doesn't look exactly like what it is?" Jake chuckled, and that was the last straw. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "You think this is a joke?" I spat, my face inches from his. "You think you can disrespect my marriage and get away with it?" "Ethan, stop!" Samantha screamed, grabbing at my arm. Jake tried to squirm free, his smug expression replaced by genuine panic. But I wasn't letting go. My grip tightened, my anger boiling over into something I couldn't control. With a swift motion, I drove my fist into his jaw. The crack of bone reverberated through the room, followed by Jake's cry of pain as he crumpled to the floor, clutching his face. "Ethan!" Samantha shrieked, her voice filled with a mix of fear and anger. I turned to her, my chest heaving as I tried to steady my breathing. "How long?" I demanded, my voice low and cold. "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. Shaking my head, I turned and walked out of the studio, ignoring Samantha's frantic calls for me to come back. My mind was racing, my heart shattered. But one thing was clear. There was no coming back from this. As I stepped into the cold night air, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I'd ever recover from it. The second Jake smirked and dismissed what I had just walked in on as training her lips, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the smugness, the audacity, the complete lack of remorse in his voice. My fists clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, and every ounce of rage that had been simmering for months boiled to the surface. "You think this is a joke?" I growled, stepping closer, my voice low but shaking with fury. Jake leaned against the wall, still holding on to that infuriating grin. "Look, man, it's not what you think. Relax. Samantha and I—" "Don't," I cut him off, my voice rising. "Don't you dare say her name." Samantha, standing frozen a few feet away, looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Ethan, please, let's just talk about this." "Talk about what?" I spun around to face her, my voice echoing through the studio. "About how I just caught you with your trainer? About how you've been lying to my face for months? What exactly do you want to talk about, Samantha? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her guilt was written all over her face, and the silence between us was louder than anything she could have said. I turned back to Jake, who, despite the tension in the room, was still trying to play it cool. "Look, man," he said, raising his hands like he was trying to calm me down. "You're overreacting. It was just a kiss. No harm, no foul." That was it. The final straw. Before I even realized what I was doing, I closed the distance between us and grabbed him by the collar of his overpriced workout shirt. "No harm?" I snarled, shoving him back against the wall. "You think you can disrespect my marriage, touch my wife, and brush it off as no harm?" Jake's cocky demeanor faltered as his eyes widened in genuine fear. "Hey, man, let's not do something we'll regret," he said, his voice cracking slightly. I let out a bitter laugh, my grip tightening. "Regret? Regret would be walking away and letting you get away with this." Samantha rushed toward us, her voice frantic. "Ethan, stop! You're going to make things worse." "Worse?" I shouted, barely sparing her a glance. "What could possibly be worse than this?" Jake squirmed, trying to free himself, but I wasn't letting go. His cocky facade was gone now, replaced by panic as he realized I wasn't bluffing. "Look, I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered. It just happened, okay?" The words only fueled my anger. "It just happened?" I repeated, my voice dripping with venom. "You don't just happen to kiss someone else's wife. That's a choice, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." Before anyone could stop me, I drew back my fist and swung. The sickening crack of bone meeting bone echoed through the room, followed by Jake's pained howl as he crumpled to the floor, clutching his jaw. "Ethan!" Samantha screamed, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. "What did you do?" I turned to her, my chest heaving, my vision blurred with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "What did I do?" I spat. "Don't you dare put this on me, Samantha. This is your mess, your betrayal." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't in the mood for apologies or explanations. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking. "I loved you, and this is how you repay me?" "I made a mistake," she pleaded, stepping closer. "Ethan, Don't!" I cut her off, taking a step back. "Don't say another word. I can't even look at you right now." Jake groaned from the floor, still clutching his face, and for a moment, I considered landing another punch just to drive the point home. But instead, I turned and stormed out of the gym, leaving the two of them behind. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it did little to cool the fire raging inside me. My mind raced as I climbed into my car and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had imagined a lot of scenarios in my head during the months of suspicion, some innocent, some not. But nothing could have prepared me for what I'd just witnessed. Nothing could have prepared me for the sheer magnitude of betrayal. As I drove away, the sound of Jake's jaw breaking replayed in my mind. But it wasn't satisfying. There was no relief, no closure. Just the hollow realization that my marriage was over, and the woman I thought I knew was a stranger. When I left the gym that night, it felt like I was walking away from more than just an argument. I was walking away from everything I thought my life was. The betrayal, the lies, the shattered trust. All of it hit me like a wrecking ball, and I couldn't bring myself to go back to the house we'd shared for years. The idea of being under the same roof as Samantha was unbearable. Instead, I drove straight to my brother Nathan's place. Nathan had always been my anchor in times of crisis. He was calm, level-headed, and fiercely protective of me. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask any questions. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. I sat on his couch, staring blankly at the floor as the weight of everything settled over me. Nathan handed me a beer and sat down beside me, waiting patiently until I was ready to speak. "She cheated," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's brow furrowed. Samantha? I nodded, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I told him everything about Jake, the gym, the kiss, and the confrontation that ended with Jake on the floor clutching his jaw. Nathan listened quietly, his expression hardening with each detail. "I'm sorry, man," he said when I finished. "I can't imagine what you're feeling right now." "I don't even know what I'm feeling," I admitted. Anger, betrayal, sadness, all of it, all at once. Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. But you need to focus on yourself now. Don't let her or that scumbag Jake control your next move. Take some time to figure out what you want." The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages from Samantha. "Ethan, please, can we talk? I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, I swear. I still love you. Don't throw everything away over this." Her voicemails were even more desperate. Her voice cracked as she begged for a chance to explain, to make things right. She claimed the kiss with Jake was a stupid moment and that she regretted it more than anything. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every time I thought about her, all I could see was that moment in the gym, the way she leaned into Jake, the way she looked at him. Her words felt hollow, like a desperate attempt to salvage something she had already destroyed. A few days later, I got a call from one of Samantha's gym friends, Rachel. She'd heard about the confrontation and wanted to check in on me. "I'm so sorry you're going through this, Ethan," she said. "For what it's worth, you're not the first person Jake's caused trouble for." That caught my attention. "What do you mean?" Rachel hesitated before continuing. "Jake has a reputation. He's crossed boundaries with other clients before. There've been whispers about him getting too close to married women, but no one's ever called him out on it. Samantha isn't the first." Her words sent a fresh wave of anger coursing through me. This wasn't just about Samantha's betrayal anymore. It was about Jake's pattern of disrespecting relationships and getting away with it. Knowing that I wasn't the first man to be blindsided by him didn't make the pain any easier, but it did deepen my resolve. Meanwhile, Samantha kept reaching out. She left long, rambling messages about how she wanted to fix things, about how much she loved me and regretted what she'd done. "Ethan," one voicemail began, her voice shaky. "I know I messed up. I know I broke your trust, but please don't give up on us. We've been through so much together. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." But how do you fix something that's already been broken beyond repair? Nathan helped me navigate the chaos. He kept reminding me to focus on myself, to take things one day at a time. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I threw myself into work, took long runs to clear my mind, and started journaling to make sense of my emotions. Still, there were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I stared at the ceiling wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Samantha's absence was palpable, like a ghost haunting the edges of my life. But every time I considered answering her calls or replying to her messages, I remembered that moment in the gym. Her betrayal had changed everything. And while the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. I couldn't go back to the life we had before. It was time to figure out what came next. For me, and only me. The fallout of what happened at the gym didn't just stay between Samantha and me. It spread like wildfire through our social circle, turning what was already a deeply personal betrayal into a public spectacle. Everyone had an opinion, and they weren't shy about sharing it. The first person to weigh in was Samantha's sister, Emily. She called me a few days after the incident, her tone sharp and accusatory. "Ethan," she began, skipping any pleasantries, "I heard about what happened. Look, Samantha made a mistake, but are you seriously going to throw away 10 years of marriage over a kiss?" I clenched the phone tightly, taking a deep breath to calm myself. "Emily, it wasn't just a kiss. It was betrayal, plain and simple. How can you defend that?" "She's your wife," Emily snapped. "People mess up. Nobody's perfect. She regrets it, Ethan. She's been crying her eyes out for days, begging for another chance." Doesn't that count for anything? Her words stung, but they didn't sway me. A kiss isn't just a mistake, Emily. It's a choice, and she made her choice. Emily let out a frustrated sigh. So what? You're just going to walk away? Marriage is about forgiveness, Ethan. Forgiveness has its limits, I said firmly, ending the call before she could argue further. On the other side of the spectrum was my best friend, Tom. When I told him about the confrontation at the gym, his reaction was immediate and explosive. She kissed her trainer? He bellowed. What the hell is wrong with her? And that guy, Jake, right? What a sleazeball. Tom didn't mince words. Ethan, I've always respected you for how calm and level-headed you are, but I'm glad you broke that guy's jaw. Honestly, he deserved worse. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Not everyone sees it that way. Well, screw them, Tom said, leaning back in his chair. You were standing up for your marriage, for yourself. If anyone has a problem with that, they clearly don't understand what it's like to have your trust betrayed. Tom's unwavering support was a balm in a storm of conflicting opinions. Then there were our mutual friends. Some of them were quick to take sides, while others tried to straddle the line, attempting to stay neutral. At a small gathering one weekend, one I hadn't planned to attend but was convinced to by Nathan, things got awkward fast. I just think it's sad, said Rachel, one of Samantha's friends. You two were such a great couple. This could have been worked out, Ethan. Worked out? Tom interjected, his voice laced with disbelief. Rachel, she cheated. She betrayed him. What's there to work out? It was just a kiss, Rachel insisted, crossing her arms. Nobody's perfect. And Ethan's supposed to just ignore that? Tom shot back. Come on, Rachel. If the roles were reversed, would you say the same thing? Rachel's silence spoke volumes. Others chimed in as the conversation grew heated. Some blamed Samantha entirely, saying she had jeopardized her marriage by letting things with Jake go too far. Others criticized me, claiming my reaction at the gym had been too extreme and violent. I'm not saying what Samantha did was right, said another friend, Greg. But Ethan breaking the guy's jaw, that's not going to fix anything. I stared at him, feeling the familiar heat of anger bubbling beneath the surface. You weren't there, Greg. You didn't see what I saw. Don't act like you understand. The divide wasn't just among friends. My own family had mixed reactions. Nathan, of course, stood firmly by my side. You did what any man in your position would have done, he told me. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for defending yourself. But my aunt, who'd always adored Samantha, called me one evening, her voice dripping with disappointment. Ethan, you two were meant to be together. She made a mistake, but you should give her a chance to make it right. I gave her 10 years, I said bluntly. She threw it away. Every conversation, every opinion felt like salt in the wound. The people in my life, who were supposed to support me, had turned my pain into a debate. Some painted me as the hero, standing up for myself and my marriage. Others cast me as the villain, too quick to anger and unwilling to forgive. The truth was, none of them truly understood what it felt like to walk into that gym and see the person you love with someone else. None of them had to live with the image of betrayal burned into their mind. At the end of the day, it didn't matter who took whose side. This was my battle to fight, my decision to make. And for the first time in a long time, I was determined to put myself first. The knock on Nathan's door came early one morning, loud and firm. When I opened it, 2 uniformed officers were standing there, their expressions unreadable. Ethan Carter? One of them asked. Yeah, that's me, I replied, my chest tightening as a sinking feeling settled in my gut. You're being served with a complaint, he continued, handing me a folded document. Jake Larson has filed a police report alleging assault. You'll need to respond through the proper channels. I took the paper, my hands trembling slightly. I should have expected this, but somehow it still felt like a punch to the gut. Jake, the man who had disrespected my marriage, was now trying to paint himself as the victim. That afternoon, I sat across from Amanda, my lawyer. She was sharp, confident, and had a no-nonsense demeanor that I immediately appreciated. "Here's the situation," she said, flipping through the complaint. "Jake is claiming you attacked him unprovoked, causing significant injuries, including a fractured jaw. The gym security footage confirms that you did punch him, but context matters. We'll argue that your actions were provoked by his conduct." I let out a bitter laugh. "Provoked? That's putting it lightly. I caught him kissing my wife." Amanda nodded, her pen poised over her notepad. "That's an important detail, Ethan. But the court will be looking at the physical altercation, not the betrayal. We'll need to frame this carefully, emphasize your emotional state and the circumstances." The thought of having to defend myself for reacting to what I'd witnessed felt like a cruel twist of fate. But Amanda's confidence gave me a shred of hope. "We'll handle this," she assured me. "But you need to keep a low profile. Don't engage with Samantha or Jake directly. Let me do the talking." While I dealt with the looming legal battle, Samantha was facing her own fallout. Word of the incident at the gym had spread quickly, thanks to whispers among her friends and a few nosy gym-goers who couldn't resist gossiping. Samantha's carefully curated image as a lifestyle influencer, her posts about health, happiness, and the perfect marriage, was unraveling. Her followers began noticing her silence, and when she finally addressed the situation vaguely, it backfired. "Sometimes we make mistakes that hurt the people we love," she wrote in a post, accompanied by a carefully posed photo of her looking reflective. "But it's through those mistakes that we grow and find redemption." The comments were brutal. "Mistakes? Like cheating on your husband? Redemption doesn't come from betrayal. This is why influencers are fake." Her follower count began to drop, and the brand collaborations she'd once boasted about quietly disappeared. It was clear that her reputation had taken a massive hit. Meanwhile, I struggled with the emotional toll of everything. The legal case, the betrayal, the public scrutiny. It felt like I was drowning in it all. Nathan did his best to keep me grounded, encouraging me to focus on the things I could control. "You're stronger than this, Ethan," he said one evening as we sat on his porch. "Jake can't take you down. Samantha's choices don't define you. You've got to remember that." I wanted to believe him, but it was hard to see the light when everything felt so dark. The first court hearing was nerve-wracking. Jake was there, his jaw wired shut, and his expression smug despite the circumstances. Seeing him again brought back a flood of anger, but Amanda's warning echoed in my mind. "Stay calm. Let her handle it." Amanda argued my case skillfully, emphasizing the emotional context and painting a picture of a husband pushed to the edge by an egregious betrayal. Jake's history of inappropriate behavior with clients also came up, thanks to testimonies from other gym members, which helped discredit his claims of being an innocent victim. By the end of the hearing, the judge agreed to reduce the charges, classifying the incident as a misdemeanor rather than a felony. While it wasn't a complete win, it felt like a small victory. As the legal process continued, I began to find a strange sense of clarity. The betrayal, the fallout, the court battles. It was all forcing me to confront my pain head-on. Samantha's attempts to reach out continued, but I ignored them. Her apologies felt hollow, and her struggles to rebuild her image only reinforced how far we'd drifted from the people we once were. The legal fallout was exhausting, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter. One where I was no longer defined by what Samantha and Jake had done, but by how I chose to rise above it. And rise above it, I would. Filing for divorce was both the hardest and easiest decision I've ever made. Hard, because it meant accepting that the life Samantha and I had built together, the dreams, the promises, the love, was truly over. Easy, because after everything that had happened, there was no other choice. Trust, once broken, doesn't magically repair itself, and I couldn't pretend that things could ever go back to the way they were. I sat in Amanda's office as she walked me through the paperwork, her tone calm and professional. She explained the legal steps, what I could expect, and how we'd handle the division of assets. but her words felt distant, like background noise in a movie. My mind kept drifting to memories of Samantha, the good ones, the ones that made this decision feel like a knife to the heart. "You're doing the right thing," Amanda said, breaking through my thoughts. "This is about moving forward, Ethan, not looking back." I nodded, forcing myself to focus. Moving forward. That was the goal now. The day I told Samantha about the divorce, her reaction was exactly what I expected. Denial, followed by desperation. "You can't mean this," she said, her voice trembling as she stared at the papers in her hands. "Ethan, please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, take a break, anything. Just don't give up on us." I shook my head, my heart heavy but resolute. "I'm not giving up, Samantha. You did. The moment you let Jake into our marriage, you gave up on us." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to argue, to plead her case. But I couldn't let her words sway me. The trust was gone, and without it, there was nothing left to salvage. Therapy became my lifeline in the weeks that followed. At first, I was skeptical. Talking to a stranger about my pain felt awkward, even pointless. But my therapist, Dr. Hill, had a way of cutting through my defenses and helping me confront the emotions I'd been burying. "Anger is a natural response to betrayal," she told me during one session. "But underneath that anger is grief. Grief for the life you thought you had, for the future you imagined. It's okay to mourn that." Her words hit me like a gut punch. For so long, I'd been consumed by my anger, at Samantha, at Jake, at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. But beneath it all, there was a deep, aching sadness. A part of me still loved Samantha, or at least the version of her I thought I knew. Letting go of that love felt like losing a part of myself. Through therapy, I began to rebuild. I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto paper as a way to process them. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned long ago: running, photography, even learning to cook. Each small step felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity, one that had been lost in the chaos of the past year. Meanwhile, Samantha was facing her own struggles. Jake, who had so confidently inserted himself into our lives, didn't stick around for long. As soon as the fallout from the gym incident became public, he moved on, leaving Samantha to pick up the pieces alone. Mutual friends told me she was struggling. Her social media presence had dwindled, her once vibrant posts replaced by vague, melancholic captions. The brands that had once partnered with her were silent, and her follower count continued to drop. "She's not doing well," one friend told me over coffee. "She's been calling people, trying to explain herself, but people don't want to hear it." Part of me felt vindicated. After all, she'd made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. But another part of me, a quieter, softer part, felt a pang of pity. Samantha had destroyed our marriage, yes. But in doing so, she'd also destroyed herself. The divorce process was exhausting, but as each document was signed and each meeting completed, I felt a weight lifting. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the start of something new. One evening, as I sat on Nathan's porch with a cup of coffee, I reflected on how far I'd come. The pain was still there, but it didn't consume me anymore. I was learning to let go, to accept that some chapters end so new ones can begin. Samantha's betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. I was still standing, still moving forward, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. And that was enough. The journey to healing isn't linear. Some days, I woke up feeling like I could take on the world, focused, driven, determined to rebuild my life. Other days, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me, a quiet ache in the back of my mind reminding me of what I'd lost. But slowly, day by day, things began to shift. The first step was rediscovering the parts of myself I'd let fade during my marriage. I picked up my old running shoes and started hitting the trails again, feeling the burn in my legs and the cool wind on my face. It was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected, like I was leaving the worst parts of my past behind with every step. I dusted off my old camera, the one I'd bought years ago but rarely used, and began wandering through parks and city streets, capturing the little details I'd always overlooked. The way sunlight filtered through the leaves, the laughter of strangers, the vibrant colors of a street mural. Each photo felt like a small piece of joy I was reclaiming. I even started spending more time with Nathan and his kids, letting their boundless energy and innocent enthusiasm remind me of the simple pleasures in life. My nephew, Ryan, insisted on showing me his expert Lego building skills, while my niece, Emma, made me sit through an entire tea party with her stuffed animals. For the first time in months, I felt myself laughing, not out of politeness, but genuinely, deeply laughing. One day, Nathan convinced me to attend a community event at the park, a mix of food trucks, live music, and local art displays. I wasn't thrilled about the idea at first, but Nathan was persistent. "You've been cooped up too long," he said, practically shoving me out the door. "Get out there, meet people." The park was buzzing with activity, the air filled with the smell of grilled food and the sound of acoustic guitar. I wandered through the booths, sipping on a cup of coffee and taking in the sights. That's when I saw her. She was standing by a display of landscape paintings, her head tilted slightly as she studied the brushstrokes. There was something about her. Maybe it was her calm demeanor, or the way she seemed completely absorbed in the moment, that drew me in. I hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. "Beautiful work, isn't it?" I said, gesturing to the painting. She turned, her kind eyes meeting mine, and smiled. "It is. There's something so peaceful about it." Her name was Hannah, and as we started talking, I found myself forgetting about everything else. She was a hiker, a nature lover, and someone who radiated a quiet confidence that put me at ease. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everything from our favorite trails to our shared love of photography. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark, not the overwhelming, all-consuming kind, but a quiet, steady warmth that made me want to keep talking to her. As the evening wound down, we exchanged numbers, and I left the park feeling lighter than I had in months. Hannah wasn't a solution to my problems, and she wasn't meant to be. She was a reminder that life goes on, that new connections are possible even after the deepest heartbreak. That night, I sat on my porch, reflecting on everything that had brought me to this point. The betrayal, the anger, the pain. It had all shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was stronger now, more self-aware, and more willing to embrace the uncertainties of life. I didn't know where things with Hannah might lead, and that was okay. What mattered was that I was moving forward, one step at a time, building a new chapter on my own terms. As I watched the stars twinkle above, I felt a quiet sense of peace settle over me. The scars of the past were still there, but they were part of my story, not the end of it. The future was mine to create, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready.